What's up guys, it's your boy Crope and here with another one. Okay, today we'll be looking at different aspects that will kill your distro hopping addiction for good. Now I'm assuming that you are coming from another operating system apart from any Linux distribution. In that case, welcome to Linux, the rabbit hole. After switching to Linux for whatever reason it may be, it is really important that you understand what Linux is and how to use it. Just like everything else in the world, you will have to learn how to use Linux in order for you to get the best out of it. Now, there's a huge misunderstanding about Linux, and that it is complex and strictly for nerds. For starters, that is partly true, but not to fear. Over the past years, Linux has changed so much that even a middle-aged person can use it. To understand Linux, we need to understand the hows and whats. Let's start with the Linux kernel. Now, the kernel is the central module of an operating system. In simple terms, it is a software responsible for the communication of your PC's hardware, like a middleman between the OS and the hardware. But we're going to dive deeper into the OS. Now, the Linux kernel manages the CPU, GPU, memory, input and output devices, resource management, memory management, device management, and system calls. Now, we are not going to dive deep into the kernel because it's another potential video. With that cleared, we can move on to GNU. Now, GNU is a Unix-like operating system that comprises of collection of many programs, applications, library, developer tools, even games, just for example. For more information, visit www.gnu.org. Now, when we combine the Linux kernel and GNU, we get the GNU/operating system, which many misunderstand as Linux, which many Linux distributions are based on. Alright, I believe now you understand or have an idea of what this whole thing is all about. Now, in summary, we have our hardware, our kernel to communicate with it, GNU, which is our operating system that consists of applications that require the communication that the kernel establishes. Hope you got all that. Now, these are the lists of major or mostly used Linux distros. Ubuntu, Mint, MX, Red Hat, Arch, Gentoo, Slashware, OpenSUSE, Fedora, Debian, and CentOS. Now, these are Linux distributions that are based on GNU/Linux. Now, you also get other Linux distributions that are based on the previously mentioned Linux distros, which are the major ones, and these could include Elementary OS, Deepin OS, Mint, Linux Mint, that is, and etc. Now, I'm assuming that you are a newbie to Linux, and I have made some recommendations for you. Just open up your browser and go to linuxmint.com. Now, Linux Mint was first developed in 2006, so it has been here for a very, very long time. As you can see here, the picture is self-explanatory. You get this Windows-like appearance that you will not actually struggle. So you basically just have to know how to operate a Windows system for you to be able to operate it. The only difference, again, is the operating system, but the UI is exactly the same. So for those who are coming from Windows, I would recommend Linux Mint, but then that's not the limit. There are more operating systems that you can use for those who are coming from Windows, which you will see because I do reviews on them. Now, for those who are coming from Mac, I would recommend that you install Elementary OS because it has that Mac-like look, and as it says, it is fast, open, privacy respecting, replacement for Windows and Mac, but I personally think that it's a replacement for Mac OS. Now, again, Elementary OS has a system where you can purchase it if you want to support the developers, which I actually recommend if you're going to use this as your daily driver. Or you can just put in a 0 and you see here it will change to download, which you can download and install into your system, which I will again make a video after this one. Now with that having said, you can see here, now let me just give you a quick or brief tour of Elementary OS, because it's the one that I'm running right now. So this is basically Elementary OS. We have our applications up here. You can change this to a more category look. So if you are that type of person who love things to be organized, you can decide to make it look like this. But I personally like it to look something like this, the grid view. So I know every single app is here. The one that I use the most will appear right here in front, and so forth, so on. Now, as I said, Elementary OS is a Linux distro that is based on a major Linux distribution, which is Ubuntu, and Ubuntu is based on Debian. So I like to call Elementary OS a grandchild of Debian. You'll hear me saying that a lot of times. So at the moment, Elementary OS is on 5.1.7, which is codename Hera, and we are currently waiting for Elementary OS 6, as you can see right here. It's a promise and it will be here. I have faith in our developers. Now with that having said, I would also like to recommend you guys, whenever you are choosing a Linux distro, or you are on Linux, or those who are still on Linux or have been on Linux for some time, instead of installing operating systems into your hardware, I would recommend that you install VirtualBox in your package manager, or you can install it through the PPAs, which you can search on the internet and you'll find. So install VirtualBox, and I always recommend that you go to osboxes.org, where you find virtual disk images. Now what are virtual disk images? These are images or an ISO that is meant to run in the VirtualBox. So you can find them here. So VirtualBox, now I'm using VirtualBox. There's also another one called VMware, so I'm using VirtualBox, and here you find the Linux distro that you might want. Again, this is limited, so they only have Linux distros that are mostly used by many people, such as OS, Fedora, Elementary OS. We have Ubuntu, the clean version, Lubuntu, which is a remix, and so forth, so on, Manjaro. And once you download these, you can install them in the VirtualBox and have a look at them, whether you would really want to use a Linux distro or not. I'm just trying to say this so that you don't need to boot your system, because I have booted my system and it wasn't the best experience. And hopefully you find a Linux distro that you will consider calling it home, as I called Elementary OS home, because I've switched from Ubuntu, the clean version, I've went to Kali Linux, Deepin, so forth, so on. And the last but not least, my recommendation or my advice to you is choose a Linux distro that will make you more productive, and that is out of the way. What do I mean? I mean, there are some Linux distros such as Deepin, Kernel, especially the Linux distros that have the KDE desktop environment, which again I will talk about in the next video, are very flashy, and you have so much privilege that you can change literally anything on the system, which is something which becomes an obstacle. Now you have all this, you know what happens when you have a lot of money and you mismanage it with your first time, you just spend it unwisely. So it gets in your way, and you end up not being productive. So choose a Linux distro that will make you productive. And no, Linux distributions do not matter. So just because you have Fedora and I am running Elementary OS, meaning that they'll be different, no, that's not it. The only difference is the desktop environment, the package manager, and the name. Alright guys, so it's been your boy Crope, and just thought I should share this with you guys. I will meet you guys in the next one. Be sure to subscribe, like, and share, and thank you for tuning in.